Hi everybody, it's Talina here with Mom and Pop Wine Shop, resuming our wine club interviews. We skipped during the month of August and are back at it again this month, September, with Chris Dickson of Twill Cellars. We included their beautiful 2018 Syrah. I have it right here. I also have it in my glass because this whole thing makes me a little nervous, so sometimes I like to have a little sip, and boy, it's tasting really well. It's the 2018 vintage. They are currently on their 2019 vintage, so when I get Chris on the line here shortly, I'll have a chance to ask him how the two wines compare. So let's go ahead and get started on that right now. I'll see if I can get Chris here. Bear with me. This is always kind of a weird part of the experience. We do have wine clubs available if anybody wants to continue to get a club now. We always do a one-time purchase option, and I always order a little bit extra so people can get it mid-month. So I sent him an invite, and hopefully he'll be able to hop on. Let's try again. It's always a little clumsy for me. Bear with us. We'll get through these bumps. There we go. Let's see. In any case, I hope everybody's as excited as I am about seeing some rain here tomorrow. There he is. Hopefully he'll come up on the screen. Hi. Hi, Chris.
Can you see me okay?
No, I don't see you at all.
Oh, no. Okay. Let me see how I do this. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It said you're unable to join suddenly. I wonder if it's just a connection issue. We can try it again. See if you can join again, or send me a request if you see how to do that. There's like a little plus camera sign at the bottom. I'll try again there. We paired Twill, as we always do. We pair a local winemaker with something that they enjoy drinking, and we did.
Hey,
there you are. That's wonderful.
nice to see you. Let's see if I can set this up a little bit.
You went sideways for a minute.
Okay. Okay. Am I still sideways?
You are still sideways.
I'm still.
But you're in harvest, so I'm sure you feel sideways all the time right now. So.
Oh my God!
There you go.
I won't lie. I just got home and I ran in the door. I was able to feed all 4 of our cats, and then I realized I didn't actually have this app on our iPad, and so I'm sorry.
No, everything's good. You're here now. You're busy. We'll hop to it. So
cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you so much for having me on, by the way. I
really why don't you tell the folks who've joined us a little bit about you and how you joined the foundation of Twill?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Chris Dickson. I make wine for Twill Cellars. And I apologize. I've lost a little bit of my voice this past week. I haven't had to yell at anybody. It's just there's been lots of communicating. And so just to get you started, so Twill Cellars, like many of my colleagues in the Willamette Valley, we're a small producer, less than 2,000 cases per year, and we essentially. We're a winery of so myself, Molly, and Daryl, and we have a cellar intern who helps us. His name is Alex, and essentially it's comprised of the 4 of us. And the way we came together in this was in 2012. I was working with Marcus Goodfellow down in the McMinnville area, and Molly and Daryl were producing wines in the same building, and we decided. I almost left the wine industry at that point. I decided after a number of years that I may go pursue something else, and they offered me a chance to join them and start a new project. And essentially, it was born out of the idea we love Syrah, we grow Pinot Noir, and we grow Chardonnay. And the thought was we would, start looking at what was possible within Oregon, so the Willamette Valley. And then in this bottling, we've got Applegate Valley fruit as well. And just to kind of give you an idea, before I joined with them, I went to the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina and did not study winemaking. There was a lot of wine during college, but I wasn't drinking great wine. It wasn't an affordability thing. But I started bartending at a wine restaurant, or a restaurant with a rather good wine list. And so I got to sit in on some of the tastings, and I knew that there was something there that I was not getting in my Rabbit Ridge or my Yellowtail that I was drinking in college, and I knew it was something I wanted to look at further. And so my good friend from high school was going to Virginia Tech, and he was taking an internship out in California after graduation, and we kind of knew, during Thanksgiving break over our senior year that was just sounded like a great idea. And so, long story short, I graduated, moved out west, worked for a winery in Sonoma, and then I knew I wanted to travel after that. And my parents were like, travel's great, but you got to pay for it, and you got to have a job. And which is, of course, I was like, oh, geez, that sounds so easy, but I strung together Harvest essentially for 3 years. And so I left Sonoma and went to New Zealand for 6 months, came back home. And that was my first iteration working in Oregon. I moved here in 2007, and I worked for Penerash before moving on I went to South Africa for 6 months, and then came home, decided to work in Washington for a full year. And then I really missed Oregon, but before I could come back, I had to go to Germany for 6 months. And then finally, it was like, I missed Portland, I missed Oregon, and in 2010, I landed back here, and I worked for Evesham Wood, and then finally Goodfellow Family Wines before meeting Molly Darrell. So that is my quick story of stringing together a lot of internships and being able to, I think, work for a lot of wonderful people. And, here we are now, and just trying not to screw it up.
So it sounds like Syrah was part of the foundational idea for Twill Cellars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really was. It was a varietal that Molly and Darrell had worked with in small amounts from Red Mountain up in Washington prior to me meeting them. And I had worked with Syrah Betts family up in Washington, also with some of the Sonoma Coast Syrah as well, and then some Syrah down in South Africa too. And so I knew it was a varietal that we all agreed on how much we adored Syrah. We felt that there, was a balance and an elegance that could share a kinship with Pinot Noir, and we also felt that it was something that we could get away with trying to grow in the Willamette Valley too. And so what we're having tonight, so in the 2018, there's 80% of it's made up of Applegate Valley, so Steelhead Run fruit, and about 20% of the fruit is from Stormy Morning, which is a site we've been working with for quite a while now that's up on the 26 corridor, on your way out towards Astoria. So it's up in the Tualatin Hills area. And, for the longest time, we've loved working with the Southern Oregon fruit, but we have these fires, and it's becoming a pretty common occurrence now with vintages. And so we are now, as of 2020, actually, we're solely out of the Willamette Valley at this point for this Syrah. So,
well, that's exciting.
It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. It's all of the eggs in one basket. But yeah, so Syrah very much was a foundational grape with the project. Absolutely.
What vintage was the first vintage? I couldn't find it on your website.
2013. 2013.
13.
I know we have some updating to do. Yeah,
That wasn't
2013.
that wasn't criticism. That was just I was like, huh, but I wasn't exactly sure.
Yeah, it's 2013, and I'll have to. This is a pretty funny little story, but my wife and I were traveling before we were married, and we were visiting India, and we were staying with this really wonderful family, and I remember giving them a postcard from Stumptown. Because they have the really cute little postcards, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, so we wrote them a note, gave them a postcard, and they love everything, and then the husband just had to laugh, and he was just like, established 2000 or something like that, because everything was just so old over there in terms of how long things have been around. And I just realized that I'm going to tell people 2013, or I've been in production for 15 years now, but it's never going to feel like a lot.
Like a legacy.
Yeah, no. It's so maybe it's always going to make me feel youthful.
That's a good perspective. Yeah. Well, wine always makes me feel youthful.
Absolutely.
Couple sips in, and I forget about all the wrinkles.
Yeah. Me too.
So I know that you're moving away from Applegate Valley, but for folks who haven't seen these vineyards, they're pretty picturesque. Can you talk a little bit about what the setting looks like? And
yeah, absolutely. I would say, for folks who might be more familiar with even the Northern California mountains, so the Trinity area, obviously we don't have Mount Shasta as the dramatic, climax of the mountain range, but what I feel like the Applegate Valley and the Rogue Valley have in general is that even in the town of Ashland, you're at about 2,000 feet. And so there's a high elevation aspect to it. And what really drew us there versus what we pulled away from, in Washington State, was you still get some variety of climate. And so, I mean, Illinois Valley, which is kind of the deeper, more western aspect that ties into the Applegate Valley, will actually bring some fogging sometimes and weather in from the coast. There's no direct road from the Applegate Valley out to the coast. You either have to drive down to Northern California or up towards Douglas County to get over. But weather does get through, and so we like that. But I would say, as far as landscape goes, you're really tucked in a mountainous landscape, where it does feel dramatic in the sense that these are these are very small valleys tucked within, again, not high peaks, but being at that elevation, you get these real dramatic shifts from daytime highs to nighttime lows. And so, of course, frost being an issue there. But what we found was we were picking deep into October for Syrah, and so with that we were getting really long growing seasons. And then, kind of adding to it, I would also say there are decomposed granite soils there, and essentially those are made up of so we think in terms of that's one of our cats. I'm so sorry.
Yes, they love to interrupt. I know.
I'm like, I'm gonna get home, I'm gonna feed them,
Yeah.
and they're gonna be totally pacified, but there are 4 of them, so no guarantees. So when we're talking about soils, I think really important to note, like the whole idea, like with why there is granite in these vineyards is this all ancient river wash soils. So essentially it's the breakdown of the Siskiyou mountain range that comes washing down through the Applegate River, which, unfortunately now it's not a very rushing river. It's low, and there's not a lot of fish, but it essentially created the bedrock of what these soils can create. And what it does for varietals like Syrah is it cues the vines that there's some inherent stress in our parent material where we're growing. And Syrah is naturally a much more vegetatively minded varietal. And so giving it that, okay, it's because it can't be too hostile. It can't be hostile enough that they can't survive, but having it be a little bit more so really puts it in balance, and then really gives us the smaller clusters we're looking for, the more balanced fruit profile, and then also resolved tannins. And so it's a great home for Syrah. Unfortunately, Applegate Valley is surrounded by forests, and my folks live in Ashland, and they're always the best marker for me as to what's going on. They just spent the last 3 weeks staying with my brother in Portland because they're smoked out in Southern Oregon, and they unfortunately get it from all three sides. So when there are fires in Northern California, they often get wind from that. This past summer, it was the Klamath, so it was pushing west. And now they've been getting a lot of the smoke from Douglas County to the north. And so it's an unfortunate time frame for agriculture down there.
Yeah, for sure. It's sad because it's such an exciting region for wine, and the topography is really
Absolutely.
unique.
Yeah, we were pretty heartbroken, and I feel for the growers, and I know that they're going to have exceptional vintages peppered into, however things have to go the next however many decades. But for us, it was a turning point. Of most of our production is in the valley, and we've been growing now a little bit more Syrah as time has gone on because we've enjoyed the results in the Willamette Valley. And so it felt like a good time to move on with that.
Yeah. So will the impending rain cause vegetative growth of the Syrah up here? That's a
very good question. No, because our vineyards are dry farmed, they have not had the luxury of being watered. I think the last rain we had was April. Sorry, this is another one.
Don't apologize for kitties.
This is Momi. He's actually very shy, so he must not know that I'm talking to him. But yeah, so it's a great question. And so since the vines haven't had rains essentially since May, and I mean really, they haven't had substantial rain since April. They're shut down. I mean, in terms of like there's still foliage, not a whole lot. But as far as what would get picked up from the rain, it's not a lot. Our biggest fear would be if we had rainstorms followed by rainstorms and a constant uptick in heat. But the Syrah is still about 3 weeks out. And so I think one of the reasons we felt confident in, sorry, I'm about to have two cats on the table. So I'm going to pull a bit closer here. If it were Pinot Noir, I think the biggest fear obviously with Pinot Noir, and I think if any of your customers may have, some of them may have worked with the fruit or seen the fruit, but Pinot Noir can be really grenade-like in the sense that it's tight. But when we get close to harvest, the skins are pretty thin, and so there's lots of vulnerability there. Yeah. With Syrah, the clusters are still they're much looser, and so we can get away with rainstorms and having fruit dry out. And so the latest we've picked Willamette Valley Syrah is Halloween, October 31st.
Wow.
I don't think it's going to happen this year. But essentially, once we lose the foliage on the vines, you're ripening in a very different way. Like you're not, they're essentially just exposed clusters, you can imagine, where we're dehydrating. You know, of course, like some things are moving as well, but there's no momentum, there's no movement through the stomatus at that point. And so I would actually say a lot of us are looking forward to a little bit of water this weekend. A lot of people are putting down cover crop, and you know, the grounds are so hard that I think there's a big fear that cover crop is not gonna take as well. But it also gives us, I think, a day or two off, because it's there's no fruit coming in now until, for us at least, until next Tuesday. So.
Yeah. Well, we've really loved your Pinot Noir in the past too, and I look forward to seeing the next vintages taking shape.
Thank you, and we're so happy, and I think you know, and I think a lot of your customers know, 2020 was an eye-opening experience, and I think the irony is not lost on me, because it was the year we pulled out of Southern Oregon, and then to have the same effects up here, you know, I think we feel fortunate. You know, one of the things that I've been talking with my colleagues is we've had a lot of onshore winds, you know, the last few weeks, that have really protected us from the fires that are around us, and so they've been pushing the smoke east, and so there's a lot to be grateful for, because we're essentially, we're going to make red wine where, you know, it might not happen every year. And so the fact that we processed our first Pinot Noir today, and to see a tank in the fermentation hall with red grapes is it's a very happy moment for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, it's a good segue, because one of the other wines that we have in stock right now is your inaugural vintage of your orange wine. So 2020, and I know that you were telling me that your original plans for that wine were changed very quickly, very last minute, and you can describe those. But I wonder if any of the other regions that you worked in when you were doing your internships, if you had any experiences like that of dealing with sudden wildfire, smoke, or other weather issues that taught you a little bit how to respond in the moment.
Well, my first harvest in Oregon, 2007, I was telling my colleague Alex the other day that I joke that all of us interns thought we should have been wearing wetsuits the entire time, just show up in a wetsuit, because you are soaking wet bringing fruit in, which, to be honest, like other than 2013 when we had the deluge of rain, 2007 was the last vintage where we were really harvesting fruit during the rain. It was coming in on the trucks in the rain, and that was a very, I mean, I think for me, an eye-opening experience, because, you know, working in Sonoma, you know, I wasn't there during their fire seasons. You know, in 2006, you know, it was my first time being in California, and I was totally amazed at how beautiful the West Coast was, and there were no bugs. You go down the list of things. So I was just happy to be on the West Coast. But 2007, I had no idea that we could make wine as beautiful as a lot of the wines were from 2007 in conditions like that. And I think that showed me that, one, if you want variability where magical wines are being made, Oregon's hard to beat as far as a U.S. state that allows for true vintage variation. And so 2007 was a big one for me to remember. And then, you know, in South Africa, I was just talking to my colleague about this today, actually, but when I was in South Africa, they had rolling blackouts every day. And so we would be pressing, and, you know, we had both a ratchet press and a pneumatic press, and you'd be pressing, and all of a sudden the power would go out, and you wouldn't have power for 4 hours. And so you'd have to go do something else. And, you know, that really taught me that we get into like whatever line of work we're doing, and we try to do the best we can. And sometimes that can be very type A, like got to work like this. And then you have these experiences where you're like, tough luck. You have to, this is going to be the way it is. And I think being able to see some of those wines at the end, how well they turned out, and knowing that it was okay to compromise a little and be flexible. And I think that definitely taught me that, every year is going to have, it's going to have its set of issues. Like this year, our biggest thing are yields. We're on average down about 30% at this point, and it's a tough pill to swallow. We all have, these ideas of where all these wines are going to go and everything like that. And it's, we're just going to adapt. And so I think both of those, both 2008 and 2007 and 2008 were like big vintages where I feel that I hope I carry those sentiments forward. But, they were very eye-opening for me. And I think, just as far as, a quick little backstory on the orange wine, as you mentioned, there were supposed to be 3 chapters to it. And we got to chapter 1 in 2020. And it was the first fruit we brought in. We were bringing in some fruit for sparkling wine, and we brought in fruit for this as well. And essentially, that was the Monday night, Labor Day, when they called for the winds, and then we had the fires, and then the smoke finally landed on Wednesday. And so we got to produce 1/3 of what we wanted. This year, I think we're going to be able to produce 2/3 of what we wanted, but we're going to be down 1/3 simply because of yields and where we're at. So there will be an adaptation, to say the least.
That's right. Well, the wine that we have has 60% Pinot Noir, I believe. That's direct whole cluster pressed, and then Chardonnay 40% that spend about a half a day kind of macerating on the skins. And then that was pressed into the Pinot where they fermented, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And so right now, and I wish I could, I wish there was smell-o-vision on this, so I could magically transport you to the Foudre, where our first part is fermenting right now. And so what we did was, and I think it's worth noting too that Chardonnay, there's so much clonal variation as to how the skins ripen. And I think it's worth mentioning because there are certain clones where no matter what, you get to harvest time and they are green. They are green and they're ripe. But they're not often the ones we would want to use with the skin maceration, just because they can present a real bitterness to the wine. And so those sorts of clusters we like to press gently and quickly and get it into juice phase. And so this year, what we have fermenting now is essentially 50% Pinot Noir, 50% Chardonnay. The Chardonnay is the Wente clone, which a little bit smaller clusters, and they also yellow up a little bit better. And so we essentially crushed it, destemmed it, and then let it soak for a full overnight cycle, so about 22 hours before pressing it. What's so cool is like you press that Pinot Noir, and it's a very like delicate, color. Not quite pink. You get it more pink when you press harder, and with that fraction we separate to put into the rosé program. So we're only taking the lightest color possible and more of like, I would say, the cuvee portion of the press cycle. And then the Chardonnay, after that second day, you just see that yellow pigment, and it's not a ton, but when you taste that juice, there's a phenolic grab to it, a tactile, textural perception. And so, both of those get blended together. And our first fermentation is happening in a 1,000-liter Foudre barrel, and it's so citrusy right now. And so that's why I'm like, smell-o-vision. It's fun to see things kind of bubbling away.
Yeah. Well, I think what's fun about orange wine is that with with white wine, you don't really often get to experience what eating a whole grape would be like.
For
You know,
sure.
you're not really communicating the skin and the
Yeah,
ripe seed that you might
absolutely.
chew up if you're just grabbing a fresh ripe grape that's not a seedless, table grape or whatever, and so it's a really fun snapshot at the more whole picture of what the
Yeah.
grapes are like. And
At,
winemakers get to taste them to decide when they're harvesting, but that's not usually communicated to the general public.
yeah. And I think like, and that's what's beautiful, I think, about the world of something like orange wine, where in our interpretation of it is, we think that we're gonna, we're opening it up to this idea that, we're gonna get the skin contact from the Chardonnay, but if we bottle that alone, I don't think it tells a complete story. And I remember I was on a call yesterday with the Slow Wine group, and we were talking about it. And this was kind of born out of the idea of, there are a number of champagne producers who I adore, in the sense that some of their blends are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and there's such a balance between the varietals. And so, knowing that, we are doing a small sparkling program, but knowing that we work with those varietals, it was, the whole idea last year was to look at putting those together at an earlier stage, but then also getting the depth and texture
Mm-hmm.
at the early window, versus saying, okay, this is gonna be textural, but after 4 years on the lees. And so we were like,
Right.
how do we look to produce something like this within a year span on the lees and barrel? And so that was where it was like, if we take some of the concepts of orange wine and put it in, maybe we can have those aspects we really like. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a fun project. I just wish there was more fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, these good years, everybody's looking.
I know. I know.
Uh,
I had one of our growers today, and she's like, or yesterday, and she's like, "Would you like a little bit more fruit?" And it's like, absolutely, yes, please.
so, uh, does that mean that you'll be looking to expand production beyond the
You
number
know,
of wines that you make, or just in terms of the amount
yeah.
that you can make of each wine?
I think realistically, 2,000 cases is a comfortable goal. We're nearly there. If we're at 2,000 cases, we have a lot more room as far as um, being able to have appropriate amount of help. And again, the gentleman that is working with me this harvest, and who has worked with us for the past three harvests, Alex, has been terrific. And I would love that we could have someone 365 days a year. And so, being a little bit smaller at this point, we're not able to get to that point. And so I think, as far as other wines being produced, we want to make sure that, and what we've talked about as a group, we don't want to go searching for vineyards maybe that we're unfamiliar with or without a plan. And so we're not just looking for fruit. We work with essentially 5 growers at this point who we've got good relationships with. They grow organically. We dry farm. And so, as long as it kind of fits in that framework, we're always open. But I've got to say, like, when you look at the Willamette Valley Chardonnay and the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, they have specific personalities, I think. And so we want there to be some continuity in how that's displayed. And I think it's important to mention, like, the Tualatin Hills AVA, so where we work with Stormy Warning. There's a lot of blood orange, there's a lot of tea components. And then working with Johan and Bracken down Eola, Van Duzer, respectively, those are darker expressions of Pinot Noir. And so, if all of a sudden we added one more vineyard which had a darker expression,
Yeah.
it would lose all of those really nuanced and delicate expressions we get from both Tualatin Hills and now the Chehalem AVA. And so there's a lot of, of course, there's a lot of like trigger happy aspects of like, oh, let's go get some more fruit and we're going to fill these bins. But to be honest, I think at this point, between the orange wine and then the small sparkling program, I think we are so capped with activities that I hope we can do a good job.
Yeah. So tell me when we can expect to try some sparkling.
Oh, if we screw it up, you're going to get to try it sooner because we're going to sell it as, Petulant Naturel.
Yeah.
And it will have the caps on them that we put on in November. Ideally, this is something that I was talking with to Slow Lines about last night, where traditionally, the thought going into this was we were going to keep them for 2 years on the lees, so going through tirage and then in the bottle and have them be for 2 years. But to be honest, I think if the wines feel ready, or at least the blend, so we do have a blend that we'll go to bottle with, if that feels ready after a year, we could release it fall 2022. Mm-hmm. The Blanc de Blanc, which I feel like is very energetic, very zippy, maybe 3 years. And so I'm hoping to tie this in. This is part of the grand plan, but we'll probably have Syrah late October fermenting. And my hope is that we can then start building our tirage for bottling in early November. And so I'm crossing my fingers. Again, this is a great learning experience, and we're gonna give it our best shot. I think the base wines going into the bottling hold a lot of promise, and as long as we do the right thing in about 6 to 8 weeks, then hopefully it goes well. Otherwise, you'll get Pet Nat in January. That's the
well. I'm sure that'll be delicious too. I mean, it's an entry point that communicates a totally different aspect of sparkling wine, and I'm just thrilled that there's more and more demand for sparkling wine broadly. Experience in Oregon than there was when I first moved here.
Us too.
We drank a lot of sparkling wine in Chicago, and it didn't seem like there was as much demand for it here. So this has been a wonderful development.
We need bubbles that we can consume that are more affordable. Speaking of me personally, and I do get cellar palates, so I won't be taking advantage of drinking our own stuff all the time. But it does get expensive, and so for us, it will be nice to have things that we get to experiment and try. And one of the things that I mentioned as well yesterday that I think's worth pointing out, year to year, like we did this based on in 2020, and again, this was prior to knowing about the incoming fires, but the fruit that was on the vine this last summer was 2 summers ago, was so utterly classic. We were heading for a Goldilocks vintage, as you know. And so we had a couple blocks that became available to us for our production, and so we kind of made the plan in the summer that we would do a small bottling we would produce some of the wines for sparkling. And 2021, fast forward 2021, we have essentially one block of Chardonnay that I think could be destined for sparkling wine, but it's not nearly the volume as what we looked at in 2020 because it was a warmer year. Getting things phenologically ripe for sparkling wine or red wine, they're very different things. And so the stuff that still remains on the vine, we're well past the sugar allowance and acid degradation that I think is appropriate for sparkling wine. And so we're kind of down to one block of potential Chardonnay. And so we we just realized, this may not be an every year thing, but if we
Sure.
get a cool vintage where it's possible, we're game on for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's I know people want to have affordable sparkling wine to drink, but when you're really making the case for why wine costs what it costs,
Yeah.
when people really truly understand, the labor and the time and the
Yeah.
cellar, all of those pieces that add up to drive up the cost, and how much work it is and how much risk it is. And when you factor all those things in, you realize, God, it should be twice as expensive, not less.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I was talking with Alex today about fruit costs and how that plays into bottle prices. And there's a big wow factor to, the just how much the fruit costs. And then you throw in élevage and timing, and then, the fact that packaging is very expensive now. The whole labor of love takes on a whole new meaning when you think about all of that. But it is true, and it is an expensive undertaking doing the method champenois. But I just, I think when we all talked about it as a group, it was going to be the only way we wanted to sparkle wine.
Sure.
I tell you that now because in January, when we're force carbonating all of these bottles that we totally botched, we won't lie on the back of the label, but no, there's a very good delineation from, in my opinion, the method champenois and then the force carbonated wines. And so for us, it was let's take it all the way, and then if it turns out okay, we'll find a way to recoup a little bit of the money so we can do it all again. So that's the idea.
Well, you can always have sort of a two-pronged approach. You can have the cellar program, working on the traditional methods, sparkling wine, and then, the little cash flow kegged force carbonated wines, so that someday when restaurants are booming again and everybody's ready to fill it like the 20s, it'll flow.
We will, and I'm shooting myself in the foot. We have talked about canning a little bit of wine this next spring, and it would either be a variation on the orange wine or the rosé. And the idea being that you nailed it on the head. We've been kegging wine for restaurants for essentially since we got going, and the whole idea was based out of, it's so hard to drop a case of wine off at a restaurant and know that a lot of people would be shocked to know, but we don't use capsules on our wine, but our packaging is still about $3 a package. And yes, it adds up. And then to know that those get opened and recycled is really tough. And so I've always looked at Portland as like a town like Lyon, for instance, where you're so close to some, growing regions that, and again, I'm just familiar with, that area in particular, where you go in and there might be some cask wines and you get these really splendid wines for such a bargain. And so the idea is that we get to shave all of the packaging costs off the wine that go to restaurants. And, within there, it's also the waste. You're foregoing the waste, and cans kind of feel that way too. So if people are going to the park or they're going home and they want a glass or two of one wine, canning is a nice way of like scrubbing the excess weight of a package and everything else. And so that, we're trying to figure that out, but we will probably have something force carbonated in 2022 out of cans. So
one more little set of questions.
Yeah, of course.
I always like to find out if our winemakers like to cook and what they would cook with the wine.
Hate cooking. It's, I've got DoorDash in like 2 minutes. No.
Okay.
I'm teasing. I think cooking is, and again, this is a point that I was talking with my colleague yesterday, Alex, and Alex mentioned that, he's every winemaker he's met, there's a there's a very sensual connection with cooking. And I remember talking to my parents about wanting to go to cooking school after graduating college, and my dad, of course, being my dad, was like, no, don't do that, you know, cook at home for now, but find maybe something else. And just in the fear that I wasn't going to land a job. And so, yeah, I very much love cooking. And I think that there's so much in common in what we do in the cellar and in cooking. And it's essentially that love of going back to the soup and smelling the soup and tasting the soup, like that is wine production. Plus all of the cleaning. There's endless amounts of cleaning and moving stuff. But you know, it's, for me, like with the Syrah, you know, I think it can go both ways. I tend to eat a fair amount of vegetables. That makes up a majority of my diet. But I would say, you know, clearly this would go great with stews. You know, I've had it side by side with a bourguignon before, both mushroom and beef. I think it pairs very well. And all I would say, like, for wines like this, you know, I think you'd be surprised that, you know, there is tannin, but it's as long as you have something that feels savory, I think you can get away with acidic, savory dishes. And so I can think of, you know, pastas, for instance, that would go well. And also, surprisingly, this goes very well with Chiappino. So if you like your shellfish and fish, and you put them with the tomato sauce and possibly like a andouille sausage, like this pairs very nicely with that sort of dish. And I've also, you know, we've had it with salad, beets, and it's so funny, like red wine, I feel like personally pairs so nicely with beets. And then as long as there's a toasted nut component, be it pepitas, or walnuts, toasted walnuts, I feel like that can take some of that tannin. So whatever can kind of grab that. I wouldn't pair it with sweet dishes. Desserts, you know, probably maybe dark chocolate.
No, I think this wine has a more savory character than some Syrahs. That's what I like about it. I wish I could find green peppercorns at the store, because I think there's like a particular, I remember working in a little French bistro where we had the classic sauce for steak that had a little bit of brandy and cream and green peppercorn, you know, and it was just fantastic. But
brandy sauces are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an electric stove, so it's hard to like toss that stuff on fire without my little flame. Anyway.
I would say, like, also worth checking out, and I'll make sure, and sorry, this is such a plug. I'm going to drop by a bottle of the 19 Steelhead. It's our last version of Steelhead Syrah. But peppercorns, like, it's so there.
As
and,
it stays, huh?
Yeah, in 19, to just kind of give people an idea of 18 and 19. 19, we had a much longer growing season than 18. And so phenologically, once we get into the 19s, we didn't know this, but like when we bottled our 19s in June of this year, I thought for sure we were going to look at these again in February. And we're releasing the Steelhead Syrah 4 months early, because, and then the 19 Syrah as well is coming out this fall, because they are so phenolically evolved that the accessibility is there. And so for folks who like olives and peppercorns, 2019 will be chock full.
We look forward to it. I want to thank you. I don't want to keep you any longer.
We can do this all night long. We'll open up more wine.
We're really happy to showcase, you know, you and Twill Cellars this month, and it's been a real pleasure to find out more about what you guys have in the pipeline, and just to let people connect with you. And someday, you know, we'll be back open for in-person experiences, and in some way,
We
shape, or form, we're trying
we
to
would
figure.
love to join you in that format, and
Yeah.
if ever one of these arises again, we'd love to participate, and I look forward to sharing new wines and all of
Yeah.
that with you in the future.
Do you have a spot people can visit right now, or?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so our tasting room in Westland is open, and we
Okay.
are open Saturdays and Sundays 1 to 5. And so we're open by reservation. Obviously, with COVID, we have restrictions as far as seating goes, and so seating is limited, but it is a very it's safe and enjoyable space to
Yeah.
come try wine if anyone's out on the weekend.
Yeah.
And if anyone is really gung-ho and techie and wants to get into the details, they can always reach out to me. It's Chris at Twill Cellars. And once we get maybe past this winter and into next spring and summer, I'm always happy to host a tasting at our little cellar, which we share at a co-op in Newburgh at August Cellars. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for letting us know about that, and hopefully we'll get some folks visiting from this
and
experience.
thank you, thank
Yeah.
you all who have joined and watched.
Yeah,
Really nice to and yeah, much appreciated.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you all.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.